Welcome to Master of Science with host Professor James McCanney. The good professor's career spans 50 years as a university teacher, scientist, and engineer. Each week, he will explore the rapidly changing world of science as many long-held theories are crumbling under the weight of new data. He will cover the fields of geology, archaeology, meteorology, oceanography, space science, astronomy, cosmology, biological evolution, virology, energy, mathematics, and more. So please welcome the host of Master of Science, James McCanney.
Good evening, everybody. Episode 64. And first of all, last week I was a little tired during the show, and it somewhat showed. So I'll try and keep it a bit more lively here. First announcement, the shortwave version of this show, which airs Thursday night, it's the same audio. A lot of people listen on shortwave, WWCR Nashville, Tennessee. That's my 25-year-old radio show and still running. It's been at that same time slot for 25 years and running. But the converts to the wintertime frequency this Thursday night. So that will be on, frequency 5.935 megahertz. That's the wintertime frequency. Okay, and that'll be until March when it changes back to the summertime frequency. It's just that show is at the cusp. The 5.935 works better when it's dark out. Quick announcement: water filter sale. I'm doing a few things management-wise with the water filter company, and therefore had to sell off some stock of products, including the MR5 whole house water filters. And these come with a UV sterilizer. It's called the Best Deal on the webpage, jmccwaterfilters.com. And typically they're priced $1,480. That includes shipping to the 48 states. Now $699. So we've got about, I'd say about 30 units, I think we're going to sell off at that price, and they're going to go very quickly. So now is the time to get your whole house water filter. These are unmatched. There's nothing like these. Stainless steel casing, 5 great big filters, 20-inch filters, and they're good for 55,000 gallons. Anyway, all of that information is on the webpage, but go there because this sale is not going to last long. And then when those are sold off, we're doing some moving around, and the price is going to go back up to $1,980. So the price is going to actually go up to more than what it was before. So anyway, go to the webpage, jmccwaterfilters.com, click on products, go to the MR5 page. Also, if you have gravity water filter elements that you need for your gravity water filter, those are on sale there also. But check that out. And this kind of sale is very low price for this equipment. Excellent equipment. And let me just say something about the condition of water. 2 things. I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've never seen the water this bad all over the country. It is horrendous. It's unbelievable. I used to do water testing for people where we'd go in and look at the water and what was in their water, etc. And now it's so unbelievably bad that it just makes your head spin. And the reason you need the whole house water filter is because you get the biggest dose of toxins in the daily shower. Okay, enough of that. All of that information on the webpage. Go there, take part in that sale, and then with your savings, should cover most, if not all, of the cost of the plumber to install it. And then you'll have water like a clear mountain stream in your house for hot and cold water. Okay. It is said that I've been talking about 3i Atlas. Of course, that's been in the news. just the subject of craziness, absolute craziness, over the past number of months since it was first noticed. I believe they had seen this long before that was noticed in July 2nd. But it's now reported that the European Space Agency is going to have, by accident, whatever that means, two of its spacecraft in the ion tail of this comet. Now, that would be here. Let me go over here and point my finger. That would be in this region of the comet, the tail of the comet, and in the what is known as the ion tail. So what they're going to be able to detect there, my belief is this is, I'm taking it with a great big grain of salt, because when 3i Atlas first came out and it said it was going near Mars, they said, oh, we've got all this great equipment and we're going to have unbelievable resolution, high resolution photographs of this comet as it nears Mars. Well, that's come and gone. We haven't seen a single photo. A couple that they've released look like chicken scratching on a barn door. Just absolutely absurd. The European Space Agency and NASA hiding data, not releasing data, spectrometry. We're talking all data. They're blocking amateur data from being presented on the internet. So when they announced they're going to have two spacecraft in the ion tail of the comet, and then we have to get through, even if they got some data, it would be homogenized, blended, and pasteurized before we would ever see it. So anyway, we'll follow that story. This story came out this week, and I just had to, once again, like I say, I got a dip in my forehead from hitting it like this so many times in my life when I read these stories. The climate insanity continues. They're talking now about injecting vast quantities of particles into the atmosphere. And this is to cool the planet from imminent destruction. The reality is there's no such thing as global climate change. And by the way, I put this in here on purpose, because now on the YouTube channel, at least, not on my Patreon channel, they don't do this kind of baloney. But YouTube will post that poster up there. Sometimes it might be up, it'll maybe appear up here, or it'll be down below, directing you to the UN Council on the Environment or some crazy thing, and they're going to try and convince you that global climate change is something real. No, it's the biggest hoax ever, and I've talked about this before. Let me give you one example. When a heat engine, which produces carbon dioxide as a result of burning a carbon-based fuel, when that engine burns the fuel, it gives off some CO2, okay? And in 20 years, they're saying this is going to have a slight effect on the atmosphere due to heating, due to the sunlight coming in and blocking it. But about 80% of that energy goes into the atmosphere right now. And they don't talk about it. They don't notice that. They don't notice it. And the Earth every night gets rid of that heat, just like Johnny Be Good, every night. You wake up tomorrow, all that heat from the nuclear power plants, from anything burning. Of course, the nuclear power plants do produce carbon dioxide, as much as they'll try and tell you that's green energy. No, it's not. It's the worst polluting source of energy ever devised by man. But anyway, the carbon burning, the petroleum, diesel, gasoline, coal, any of the carbon-based fuels produce carbon dioxide. And so, but 80% of that energy, using the Carnot cycle, it's maybe 75%, but ultimately it's about 80% of that energy goes into the atmosphere right now, baby. It's there, and they don't talk about that. It's so ridiculous. Global, and so they're going to put this little banner under my YouTube channel trying to direct you to the correct answer. Oh my goodness, these people are so lame. Excuse me. But anyway, I had to get that in there because when you see this now, you're going to see that little badge of courage there by the uh, by the globalists trying to pump up their information, their disinformation. Let me put it that way. Okay, enough of that. But these jokers are talking about putting vast amounts of particulate matter into the atmosphere to cool the atmosphere. But gee, they're having a hard time. They're hard time convincing politicians and getting the resources. And then they can't explain really what the end effect is going to be either, let alone supplying huge amounts of barium and aluminum into the atmosphere, which will kill forests. Oh, well, just a little side effect. I'm sorry, we're going to kill your forest so that we can cool the planet. Are these people are insane? Turn them out into their sandbox and let them play someplace, but don't let them play with the world. Okay, anyway, Southwest Research Institute, which when I actually worked on a contract with Southwest Research when I did my master's degree research when I was at Tulane. It was associated with some chemists at Southwest Research, and my advisor at Tulane was associated this project that I worked on, and in solid state physics, and was dealing with nuclear high energy X-rays, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it was dealing with research which ended up with some very interesting results. But anyway, Southwest Research has since those days grown into this vast complex of think tank for government projects. A lot of it, like say Battelle, which is you don't ever see it. These people never publish in peer-reviewed journals. This is like what I call it tier 1 science or military science, and it's globally funded. So the scientists in other countries are working on these also. But at any rate, they're claiming that they can build satellites now that can go out and visit comets. Well, gee, isn't that slick? How many comets have we visited already? A dozen. Enough to prove that they're not dirty snowballs, but don't tell that to Gulf South Research. They're going to go out and search for a dirty snowball. But they're talking about that, and they say that the technology is available. Well, Gulf South, the technology was available a long time ago. They're talking about, however, a twist to this is they're talking about going to these newly discovered high-velocity comets, and like the recent 3I Atlas or the two previous cometary nuclei that came from outside of our solar system on hyperbolic orbits. This is an interesting story. Elon Musk in the news here with a very sad look on his face. His SpaceX project for heavy launch vehicles is behind schedule. It's behind schedule, and he's had some failures, and so NASA's going, we got to beat China to the moon. China has made a claim that they're going to send manned missions to the moon by the year 2030. And so we got a space race on our hands again. This is just like back in the old Apollo days when we were trying to beat the Ruskies to get to the moon. John Kennedy, by the end of the century. Well, John was dead, and Richard Nixon, Tricky Dick, was in office, and we all know what happened to the Apollo program. But now NASA is in a race to get to the moon to beat China. And so that's their big, push. But now the issue with Elon is that he was going to design both the rocket, the lift vehicle, the transfer vehicles, the refueling vehicles, which interestingly enough, Apollo program never needed, and also the lander, the spaceship capsules and everything. But anyway, Elon claiming that he's going to make it. He'll be the prime contractor, but NASA now looking at Blue Origins and others for potentially heavy lift to go to the moon. We'll see how that plays out. Okay, now here's a story that, I was going to talk some more about some of the unusual properties of 3I Atlas, but I'm going to skip that. The next story I think is very interesting. Now, Baal, it's spelled B-A'-A-L, is a character that comes out of the Mesopotamia, the early civilizations. And they talk about this, and there's, of course, Moloch, which is slightly different. These from the Canaanites as opposed to the other cultures that were in the Mideast. Some of the early cultures that we have, what they call the cradle of civilization. And by the way, we had the Mayans, we had the Incas, the pre-Incas, the Olmecs, in the Americas, what we now call the Americas, at the same time or even earlier. I'm not talking about the modern Maya or the modern Inca, which were around 800 AD. I'm talking about thousands of years earlier. And that's where the Mayans got their mythology from. It had been carried down for thousands of years, literally Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god of the night sky, who brought oceans in on his back, the tidal waves, referring to the large comets that came through, and primarily Quetzalcoatl being related to the planet Venus and the comet Venus. Okay. But Baal is, interestingly enough, associated with the bull. Now, the horns of the bull are an ancient reference to comets, because the large comets develop literally horns that come out in the sunward side of the comet. And it's a plasma effect. It's a plasma effect, part of the overall electrical discharge. And I'm not going into the physics of that tonight, but just the references to Baal. Now, I'm going to go through some of the coordinated names for Baal, but the other thing that they don't mention, and you can look up all you want about Baal, and by the way, the reason I'm mentioning this is because there are Baal worshippers alive and well in the world today, and they're primarily associated with the Vatican, the Black Pope, and the ruling classes that come down from the Rothschild, the Vatican front. The Rothschild banking system is the front agency for the Vatican Bank, run by the Jesuits. And of course, people that are Catholic, they go, "Oh, this is conspiracy theory." No, you have to understand that the Pope that you see is from the Vatican. That's a different line. That's a different program, you might say. Okay, another thing that Baal is associated with is the control of weather, which is very interesting, because the big comets, and we're not just talking about thunderstorms and things like that. We're talking about severe weather, extreme weather. And so this is associated with comets, and my work has proved that. My book, the Principia Meteorologia, the physics of sun-earth weather, goes through all of the details on how weather is controlled, the very severe weather, things that you don't see on planet Earth. I have the one example where in 1999, we had a small comet and we had a planetary electrical alignment that I was able to predict 6 months in advance that there was going to be severe weather during that encounter. And there was. That was Hurricane Floyd came from, one of 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic at the same time. How often do you see that? And the night before I had predicted this in May. It occurred in September. But the night before all of this broke loose, there wasn't a single storm in the world. And all of a sudden, boom, that alignment hit, and there were 60 hurricanes around the world in various stages, 5 of them in the Atlantic off of Florida, one of them being Hurricane Floyd. And it was due to a small comet, which we got connected to electrically. And so imagine the big comets, when they roll through, the devastation and the weather control is amazing. And of course, the ancient people experienced this and they talk about it. So what did they do? They created deities. But as with deities of old, they were also, so they had multi-personalities, let's put it this way. If you look at Quetzalcoatl, for example, the Mayans, Quetzalcoatl brought them corn, was the person who literally brought them corn. And the original corn seed, which they thrived on, was necessary for their survival. And Quetzalcoatl was also the comet Venus, captured by Jupiter, that became the planet Venus. And so you have these multiple personalities associated with a name, and that was the case with Baal. So Baal was the inventor of banking. And the other thing about Baal, which is interesting, in all of this deception about this comet coming by Mars, because the intelligence agencies which control NASA, and NASA is not a space agency, that's the biggest lie on the planet. NASA has always been part of the intelligence network. And their job, NASA's the facade, is to present themselves as a space agency that just never seems to get anything done. And over the 60 years, they've really accomplished nothing, very, very little. But the real part of NASA is a part of the intelligence network to do studies, human psychological studies, dig caves for surviving Planet X passage and things like that. Yeah, and of course their job is to create the controlled opposition. This is something a lot of people don't understand. And when you see all of these videos today about 3i Atlas and, oh, it's going to be an alien spaceship or Avi Loeb, this is all controlled opposition, boys and girls. This is all controlled opposition. That's what it is. So, okay. Let me get back to Baal. The other thing about Baal was he was actually, and this is the interesting thing about Mars and all this concern about Mars and the comet passing Mars and all the hiding of data, is because NASA has had very good equipment on Mars for a long time, but they're not going around crater walls and taking pictures. They are studying the archaeological ruins of when Venus the comet came by, just like they're doing in Antarctica. The Germans had a lot of research going on in Antarctica, but it's always been off limits to you, the general public. And that's because Antarctica used to be a semi-tropical, a moderately tropical place without an ice cap. That ice cap is recent, within the past few thousand years. And by the way, that's why they have all these clowns running around the internet now claiming that all of this stuff happened 13,000 years ago. It's out of sight, out of mind, out of time, and to defray the public from understanding that these events, the Noah's flood and the Venus event, the Moses event, where the Hebrew Israelites, not the Jews, but the Hebrew Israelites, came out of Egypt with Moses. That was during the Venus event, very clearly. Okay, so at any rate, the point is that when Venus came by Mars, it took its atmosphere and ocean, and that's why we see the hulk of the planet today. That's real history. That's the true history of our neighborhood in the solar system. But anything to keep you from understanding this. Okay, so, and that's, by the way, why I have multiple outlets for this show, is that these are things that may be chopped on the YouTube channel, but they'll get through on the other ones. So you have to be aware of my Patreon channel, patreon.com/JMCCSCI, and the shortwave channel, which carries at least the voice part, the audio part of this. And there are other outlets, Truth Be Told Radio Network, where this airs, and some other platforms also. But the point being, that Mars was associated with Baal, or Baal was associated with Mars. And there was interplanetary travel between Earth and Mars because the human race goes way back. And that's like I say, there's so much misinformation coming out that, oh, there was an advanced civilization at Göbekli Tepe. No, Göbekli Tepe was covered by a massive tidal wave that brought in all of this rock, etc., and just filled it in. To imagine that this was done by hunters and gatherers, and they built this amazing city and then took little baskets of dirt and filled it in and covered it up so nobody would find it. That's the most ridiculous story I've ever heard in my life. If you believe that, man, do I got a bridge to sell you. Oh my goodness. Anyway, now I'm going to go through the different variations of Baal, the word Baal, in the English language. And these come through Latin, etc., through the ancient languages. So Baal is, of course, the one way of saying Baal, and that's how it comes down to us. And so Baal, of course, refers to this god where you have to take, what was it? There was a halftime show or something where they did this. They brought this into a stadium. It wasn't not like a football halftime show, but they brought this 1930s. They brought a image of Moloch, or which is a different culture's name for Baal, into a stadium, and they had all this parading and women dancing around it, and they were simulating the offering of babies into the fire of the smoke-breathing bull, Baal, and this was by the Baal worshippers. So, like I say, part of why I'm going through this is because Baal worship is alive and well today in the ruling classes, the Bohemian Grove, etc. But just think of all of the different meanings of Baal. To bail out of an airplane, what do? The airplane's going down, you're bailing out. And what did Baal do from Mars? He had to bail out. He had to get off of there. They knew this comet was coming. They had to get off and get down to Earth. And so they brought their banking system with them. Okay, so that's one. And bail out a boat. When the water gets too high in the boat, you get a bucket and you bail it out. Or a bailer, or the different terms that go along with bailing out a boat. And what does that have to do with that? It's the boat sinking. You got to get out of there, or you got to get the water out of there. So that's bail out a boat. Bail used in terms of being imprisoned. What do? You pay bail. You bail yourself out. Another term. See, all of these terms come down and related to weather, etc. So this is ingrained into our society, but nobody sees it. It's like one of those things. It's like the billboard in front of your face and you can't see it. And the reason I'm talking about this is because Baal worship is going strong today because of these comets. Now, one thing they do is they worship comets, and they know that they are out of their control. And this is why, let me repeat a little story. I was on Art Bell's show. This was, oh my goodness, back in the 90s. I was on a Christmas special, and we were talking about the Russian space program, something that I happened to learn quite a bit about, and firsthand, by the way. And so anyway, the subject of my plasma discharge comet model came up. Art says, hey, clearly you're right about this, about these comets, and they keep pushing this dirty snowball comet model. And of course, they're still doing it today. Even after the European Space Agency landed on a comet nucleus, there's no ice, there's no snow, there's no water, there's no sublimation coming off the nucleus to create the tail. It's a hot, dry rock. And so the European Space Agency literally posted that comets are not dirty snowballs. Yet every article you see today, it starts out with they explain, like Avi Loeb just came out for the explanation for why the comet 3I Atlas had a sunward spike, and then all of a sudden it turned into a tail. He's going, oh, that's because carbon monoxide in this ancient water body exhausted first, and that created a sunward direction tail. And then after it got closer, then the water came along and made the other tail. I mean, just fairy tale. You know, Hans Christian Andersen did nothing on these people. These guys spin and spin and spin, and then somebody says, oh, that's the explanation. And then it gets published, and everybody agrees with it, and life goes on as before. With the dirty snowball comet model, which is total fantasy. I mean, can you believe these people? But they're protecting. Part of this is they're protecting the what would you call them? The Baal worshippers, who are their controllers, who write their paycheck, and so they're told. They're literally told, just like good politicians who are told to vote for this bill, and they do because they've been compromised. And a lot of these scientists have been compromised too. They tried to do it to me, and it didn't work because I have ethical standards. And I know it's a dirty game out there. You can't believe what they do to these people. They get them compromised in 10 different ways of doing it. Then they got them and say, okay, you want your paycheck, you want to retire, you want to keep your house for the wife, you know, kids want to go to college, everything's good, you just play a game. That's the way they work it. So anyway, all of these different meanings for Baal. And the end result is that they are very worried that one of these comets or something like that is going to turn into, they don't really know what, they're just afraid of it. When Hale-Bopp came into the solar system, the Vatican asked NASA, is this wormwood? Wormwood being the biblical reference to Nibiru, Planet X, what we call Planet X today. And so they actually built an observatory, staffed it with professional astronomers, mainly from the University of Minnesota, who I knew who they were, and I confronted them, and they were very very disturbed because I knew who they were and what they were doing. And they first built the Lucifer telescope in Arizona. The Lucifer telescope, yeah, to look at Hale-Bopp. And it was a different kind of telescope. It was a wide field telescope specifically designed to look at comets, specifically Hale-Bopp, which was in the solar system for a period of 6 years, becoming a planet. And they were able to hide that from the public. While this whole Planet X, crazy lady talks to aliens, all of that raged and on the biggest radio shows, etc. Yeah, you know, you can, as the public, you just cannot believe all that goes on behind the scenes. And by the way, if you go into politics today, you go up the line in the United States right now, all these people are compromised. All of them. All of them. It's unfortunate. I don't know what to tell you, but well, I'm not going to go into more detail on this, but I wanted to make this clear that this is related to the secrecy about comets, because comets are the lawless ones. They're the things that they cannot control, and they don't want you to know that there's something out there that they can't control, that they're in charge of everything. That's why when you listen to the evening news, you turn on the evening news, it's the war in the Mideast, it's the jobless rate, it's the immigration problem, on and on and on, whatever it is, the daily, this guy did that guy took a bribe. Whatever it is, they just go down this laundry list of all the things you should worry about, but boy, do they not touch on the real things that you should worry about, because they can't control them. They can't control a raging comet coming into the solar system. So they got to make out this comet coming by Mars, which is actually pretty big. It could be very much planetary size. And then they create all of this garbage science around it, and Avi Loeb, and the amount of misinformation and then counter misinformation and then controlled opposition, that's what you see. This show is, what are we getting? A few hundred views a week? And you find other pages that just popped up out of nowhere getting 500,000 a week. What does that tell you, boys and girls? Okay, so anyway, jump on to the next. Here we go. Here's an interesting electrical alignment that's coming up on the 20th and the 21st of November. And so what we have is we have Earth, the new moon, not the new moon passing, but the new moon, literally the new moon, Mercury, and the planet Uranus. Now, these alignments happen all the time. This is not a visual alignment. This is an electrical alignment. And so that's just an interesting date to keep in mind. I'll keep that as we move closer. We're going to see if that creates some weather scenarios, if we get a connection, electrical connection with Uranus, which is way out there. And if it were Jupiter, we would have a serious problem. And by the way, let me see if I have the dates here for the Jupiter winds. I think the Jupiter winds are coming in March. Let me check that. Okay, so the Jupiter winds, the actual alignment with Jupiter is on January 10th, but the Jupiter winds typically start a little early, and it depends on the solar wind, what it's looking like, how it's bending, because it doesn't come necessarily straight out. It comes out like kind of like one of those backyard water sprinklers, the old type that would spin around like this and the water would come out. The solar wind is something like that. And so it's not always perfectly aligned when these things start. So it could be as early as around January 1st, which would make it tough for winter travel if you're going in a jet, or if you're, say, going in a car and there's a snowstorm and you have these straight line winds caused by Jupiter. It could make travel a bit ugly. So I would say from about, for sure, the 5th of January up to probably the 15th of January, expect these straight line winds. That's how we determine them. And I noticed this a long time ago. And the way this actually started was around 1995. I got a call from some people in the military. They had just put up a military satellite, and its goal was just to monitor charged particle activity around Earth. And they got a big blast of electrons. And they said, this came from Jupiter. What's going on? Jupiter is sending us these basically lightning bolts of electrons. And so I explained to them, yeah, this is the Earth's discharge of the solar capacitors connecting with that of Jupiter. And that's the way, because the bulk charge carrier in the discharge is in the form of electrons. And so anyway, that's where it started. And so I've been somewhat monitoring this ever since, talking about it on this show, on my radio show for decades. Every time this happens, people are interested. But you'll see the way you actually see it on Earth is straight line winds. And they just, from one direction, they go for, typically in the northern hemisphere, out of the west. But they go for days and days and days and days, day and night, without stopping. 40, 50 mile an hour winds, and you're going, what the heck's going on? Well, the Jupiter winds. Okay, so just a quick note here. Avi Loeb, this is kind of funny, actually, claims to have modeled the transition between the anti-tail for Comet 3i Atlas and the regular tail. And of course, I just mentioned this a minute ago, where they claim that, the CO2 melts and that comes out the nose side of the comet. Isn't that interesting? Because the comet nucleus is typically tumbling, so how does it know where the CO2 coming out the nose side? And then the water comes out the backside. Well, wait a minute. How does the solar wind get around there to sublimate the water from the backside? of the comet nucleus and only the water. You know, these people are so lame. It's just, and this gets published. This is in peer-reviewed journals. Yeah, that's why peer-reviewed journals are just garbage, because they're full of this stuff. But anyway, the comical part of this is that Avi Loeb was saying that this anti-tail was typical of a jet, some kind of advanced propulsion, proving, in his eyes, that 3I Atlas was an alien spaceship. But now he's saying, oh no, it's due to natural causes. So this takes him in everything he's been doing, claiming this has been some kind of artificial technology spaceship, and now he's explaining it by ice ball comet model, dirty snowball comet model, modeling. You know, this is so lame. This is so lame. So he just disproved everything he's been spouting for 2 months, 3 months now, since July, August, September, and now almost all of October, 4 months. He's been spouting that this is an alien spacecraft, and then he uses the dirty snowball comet model to model the jet turning into the regular comet tail. It's just, I mean, this is amazing to watch. I want to quick talk about comet A6 Lemon, which is a comet that's in the solar system right now, growing wings. Now, this is one of the other characteristic shapes of comets. I've talked before about the phoenix shape of the comet, and various comets have come close to the sun, moving very quickly, and they take on this shape with the arms, and they have like the head, and then they have the arms, and this is very similar to the Quetzal bird. I talked before about the Quetzal bird in Mexico, the incident where I was in a little Lacandon village. This is off of Tulum, long before the tourism ever began there. I was down in the jungle with some friends and heard about this Lacandon village. So I walked there one day by myself and entered this little village. And they didn't speak Spanish. I didn't speak very good Spanish anyway at that point in my life. And I was in the village most of the day. They greeted me with a bottle of mezcal, which is basically tequila made from local cactus, a mezcal cactus. And so I befriended the men in the camp, and they were very friendly. And then at the end of the day, I went over to the woman's little hut she had as like a little store. This woman was like a little bird. She was so little. Her little arms were, she just looked like a little teeny bird almost. You know, that's how delicate she was. But these were actual Lacandon Indians. And she had a little store there, and she had fruit in there. And the only thing from the modern world she had was condensed sweetened milk, those little cans. So I bought a couple cans of that from her. And so up above her head in this little hut was a Quetzal bird, which is a bird of paradise, the big, long, flowing tail. And they're not very big. They're about this big, the body. They're a rather small bird, but very just gloriously colored bird, beautiful bird, is sitting on its roost above her head. And all of a sudden, it was the Quetzal bird is famous for roosting in the daytime and flies at night. And so it was dusk, it was the end of the day. And I looked up, and this Quetzal bird opened its wings completely and flew right over my head. I mean, like from here to there, right over my head. And I saw the whole underbody of this Quetzal bird fly over my head. And it was now, I mean, at that time, I was just a young person I don't know how old, maybe 23 years old, something like that. And I didn't know that later in life, this would be essential information for me. That's why they called it the Quetzal bird. And it seems like God has these things planned in our society or on this planet Earth. But this beautiful Quetzal bird had exactly the shape of the comet, the winged comet. And so anyway, very few people probably have ever seen a Quetzal that close up fly over their head. And it was something that took me some decades, actually, until I realized, and I was doing my theoretical work in physics, dealing with the plasma discharge comet model, understanding that that's why the ancient Mayans referred to Quetzalcoatl as related to the Quetzal bird, because it had the same shape, the long flowing tail, the wings, and the under pattern was that specific shape, just like a comet. Okay, so anyway, comet A6 Lemon, sprouting wings, and it's a very typical shape, and that's a plasma effect. Once again, just like horns are a plasma effect of the discharge, the wings are another plasma effect. Okay, this article, NASA supposedly has figured out how the solar corona has its high energy. Now, I've been through this with these people probably 10 times. I figured this out a long time ago, what is actually the cause of the, we're talking relativistic electrons orbiting the sun. And they're trying to figure out how the heat gets transferred from the sun, which is only about 5,500 degrees, to millions of degrees in the solar corona. But they never talk about why is it just pure electrons, why is it not plasma of some other kind. They don't understand this. That just trying to, and it's what's so funny about it is they create these terms, and the creation of a term is their theory on how it works, the process. They have no process. There's no mathematical or particle process that they use. It's just a name that they create. It's kind of like magnetic reconnection for the people dealing with solar wind. Magnetic reconnection is the magic word. If you say it, everything is cured. And so anyway, but what I found bizarre was that they have realized that there's an excess population of protons in the solar wind, something I've been saying all along. That's what builds the solar capacitor that causes all of our electrical effects in the solar system. But they say it incorrectly. They say that the protons are hotter or have higher energy than the electrons. Well, wait a minute, boys and girls. Energy, what they're talking about is kinetic energy, 1/2 mv squared. The proton is 2,000 times more massive. So yeah, given the same velocity, the proton would have 2,000 times more energy, 1/2 mv squared. Same velocity, 2,000 times the mass, proton has 2,000 times the energy. So it's clearly much hotter in that sense. However, you could have a proton, here's the problem, because the way I state it is that there's an excess current of protons, and the current is related to the charge and the velocity. It's literally the product of the charge times the velocity. That's what current is. And so what I say is there's an excess current of protons. That's the correct way to say it. So these clowns at NASA don't even know what they're talking about. And this is the problem. You've got these idiots with a PhD that don't know what they're doing. They're seeing data. They're seeing something, and they're at least smart enough to know that there's an excess current of protons, but they don't know how to say it. They don't know what it really means, and they don't have a theoretical explanation. And the real explanation is that the sun is a superatom, basically. It has a positive charge on the upper atmosphere, the protons, and then the electrons are literally in orbit like a superatom, and that's what allows relativistic electrons to orbit the sun. It's as simple as that. And then that also acts as a screen, so when the fusion explosions occur in the upper atmosphere, the protons are moving out, and they see that screen of electrons, and they are accelerated. That's what accelerates them out into the solar wind, and they break through in little holes. There's a magnetic hole that builds up, and the protons come shooting through. That's the process for building the solar wind, but these idiots, they have no idea. And it just amazes me. These people have access to data. They're the so-called top plasma physicists on this project, and they don't know what they're doing. It's pathetic. It's actually pathetic. Okay, so I think what I'll do now is go through a series of pictures. I had an article. There was an article that was written. It says, this again referring to the Comet 3I Atlas, flips its anti-tail to a regular tail, and they're asking, is this alien technology or whatever? And let me just quick read my answer on the air, because my answer, they did not allow it. It was against, it violated their terms of service. And so I wanted to read my reply to this article, which was querying whether this was alien technology or some kind of natural process. The first thing I say is the first photo real or an artist's conceptual drawing? If it's real, then why is it so amazingly clear and detailed compared to the other photos? So anyway, the situation is they have this beautifully clear picture of a comet with a sunward spike, but it turns out that it's not 3I Atlas. And I later sent in a criticism of the article saying, hey, you're posting an article talking about this comet, but you're posting a photo that is not this comet. And then I go on in my comment, which was, by the way, rejected. There's no mystery regarding the sunward spike. A property of all comets, it is just that you cannot see it in the visible light on most lower energy comets. It is amazing, to say the least, that all of these professors and NASA scientists continue to make projections based on the thoroughly disproven dirty snowball comet model. The pioneer physicist, Professor James McCanney, 1979, showed that comets are the discharge of the solar capacitor. And the sunward spike is part of the overall electrical discharge. This comet is acting like a normal comet, with the exception of its high velocity, which causes lower tail activity and larger electrical discharge visible in the data. The change in orbit is also explained by the plasma discharge comet model because of what is known as the tail drag. Stop all the bizarre hype. It is not an alien spaceship, although aliens could use comets' electrical and magnetic field to break coming into the solar system. If NASA were a real space agency, none of this ridiculous internet hype would be possible. The fact that nobody has any respect for never a straight answer allows for all the hundreds of new websites that have emerged spewing totally speculative misinformation. And that, my friends, was not allowed. It did not meet their terms of service. Okay, so let me go through some photographs now, and we will discuss each one of these. Just give me a minute here. Okay, here's a beautiful comet. Now, I want to give credit here. These are from a website called Unsplash, and they are free for use as long as you credit the author, or the photographer in this case, which is Steve Busch, B-U-S-C-H. And here is the comet A6 Lemon, the one I was just talking about. But it shows this marked green halo, and then you can see that greenish hue extends back along the sides of the tail. That is the hydrogen. That's hydrogen. Now, standard astronomers would try and convince you this is cyanamide, or other potential carbon compounds. No, it's water. It's the green water line. And that's where the hydrogen, the line, I'm sorry, it's the green hydrogen line. And of course, there's plenty of hydrogen. Okay, so, but that's comet. Here's another picture of the same comet. And you can see the ion tail, the very thin tail sticking out behind the comet. and the comet material coming into the nuclear area, and the green halo, which is the Debye shield of the comet nucleus, of the charged comet nucleus. Okay, this is of another comet, but also you see the green halo. The green halo is characteristic. It's a property of all comets. It's the Debye shield that basically shields the electrical charge, and that's why also there's if you were to put a spectrometer on this region, the spectrum coming out of the center part of the comet would be different than from the outer part of the comet because of the induced electric dipole force. That's another one of my theoretical models. Okay, I wanted to show, let me see. Okay, I'm going to jump back here in a couple photographs. Let me go back to these. Okay, this is an interesting picture now of Baal. And so interesting that barium and aluminum, if you look at those elements in the periodic table and you put them together, they spell Baal. And they are the primary elements used in chemtrail spraying, and that's what they want to, when I talked about the article earlier, that where they want to spray this aerosol into the atmosphere to cool it down, that's what it is. And barium and aluminum spell Baal. Here I wanted to talk about the association. The Canaanite god Baal is the bull, and I keep referring this. The horns of the bull is the ancient reference to comets, because the big comets form these bull-like horns. Okay, here it says he is often depicted wearing a horned headdress and sometimes even showed riding a bull in sculptures. While the bull is his main symbolic animal, other portrayals have emerged in different contexts. Okay, this first one. It says symbolism of the bull, strength and fertility. Baal's connection to it is the key part of his identity as fertility and the storm god. That's what I was pointing to earlier. When the comets come through, the big comets, they cause electrical activity on Earth and large storm systems. So these are not just storms, these are big-time storms. And here's a picture. This is from a website. It shows the website here. But anyway, it shows Baal as a influencer of weather, and but you can see the staff, which is his staff of power to drive weather, and the implication, of course, is electrical. And so you go back to Quetzalcoatl, you go back to the Colburn, you go back to any reference to the ancients that are talking about this. They're not talking about asteroids hitting Earth. No, not at all. And that's one of the biggest disinformation ploys that's running around the internet these days, is that somehow 13,000 years ago an asteroid hit Earth and caused the ice ages and all this other stuff. Total misinformation. And it's being put there by people specifically to lead the public astray. It's controlled opposition. Okay, so that's it. We'll talk to you next week. But the other thing is, it doesn't do me a lot of good to have to talk about all of this these bizarre situations in the scientific world. But if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand what's coming at you. In terms of, let me just take this a step further and understand that the politicians, I'm going to repeat this, the politicians are all under the thumb of Baal. This is the Baal worshiper in the World Bank. The CIA, which basically has controlled the presidency since John Kennedy, remember Kennedy was going to do away with the CIA. Well, they did away with him. The CIA is nothing to do with the United States. It's the police force of the World Bank, of the Rothschild World Bank, which runs out of the Jesuit banking community in the Vatican. So this is where the power of the world is over the Bank of London, over the Federal Reserve in the United States, over the U.S. military, all of the top people. You do not get to top positions in the U.S. government without being under this cabal. So with that, I'll leave you. And once again, this all comes back, interestingly enough, to comets. And that's why they are doing everything they can to keep this message from getting to the public, you, the public.
This has been Master of Science with host James McCanney. Join us each week as James will delve into historical figures such as Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and the great mathematicians as we explore the history of man, Earth, and our universe as you've never seen it before. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern,